you certainly can adjust them unless they're like the bike behind me or the other bike over there or the one that's behind you, which have all got integrated cockpits.
Yes.
So yes, the joy of modern integration, mate, is that you cannot adjust bar angle on a lot of these one-piece bars. They're just fixed. But a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about now is more related to regular, good quality bikes where you can actually rotate the bar around. This is one of my huge gripes with is the non-adjustability of modern aero cockpits where there's integrated cabling and that sort of stuff, because it doesn't allow you to do this sort of thing with a bar, which can be hugely helpful. And
doesn't that make less margin for error though for somebody sticking it on themselves because it's in the position it should be?
No, because it's not. So it's not always in the position that it should be, as we'll discuss in this video. So we'll give you a bit of background. Old style bars had a much wider reach and a larger drop to them. Okay, so in years gone by, this curvature was a much larger radius and it dropped down a lot bigger. And one of the reasons why was because the hoods, the old school hoods from the sort of 90s and early 2000s, were much smaller, and they would sit way down along the bar. And if you can splice in some old footage of someone like Eddie Merckx or someone from back in that day, and you'll see his wrist cocked right down along the bar like this. And this was just the way that road bike bars and hoods were designed at the time. And over time, we've realised that that's probably not ideal for wrist inflammation and discomfort in the tendons in the wrists, and bearing your weight on your hands and taking as much weight off the hands as possible. So what's happened? Bars have gravitated to be smaller, and a lot of them, like this old 3T Ergonova, have got a really, really shallow drop now and a fairly short reach. And that's designed around the much larger hoods that exist today. And with hydraulic hoods, it's taken another step further. Hydraulic hoods are huge.
Rhino horns.
Yeah, mate. Some of especially like the first generation of Shimano hydraulic hoods, they were ginormous. You know, you're trying to get a lady with small hands, or even, I don't even have a particularly big hand and they're way too big for me. You can't reach the levers. They're a nightmare from a bike fitting perspective if you've got small hands. They are getting smaller. The pistons travels are getting smaller and they're optimizing them, but they're still bigger than the mechanical ones now. So if you've got small hands, you might want to go with a mechanical group set just so you can reach the levers properly. They have very little adjustability of the lever gape as well, which is another pain if you've got small hands. So look, talking about bar angle, most modern geometry bars, if you look at them from the side, you'll notice that this section here projects forwards and it's relatively flat, and then it drops down with a fairly tight angle here, and then the angle flares out at the bottom. Some of them will drop down more rapidly, and some of them have this flat projection across the front. A very good rule of thumb, if you're a rider who is, your wrist is coming in on a sort of a 30 to 45 degree angle, and we'll see if we can get some shots of these different wrist angles for you to explain this in a minute. If your wrist is coming in from a fairly normal angle, which is sort of 45, 30 degrees in like this, a good place to start with the bar, the rotational angle of the bar, is to have that top section ever so slightly inclined downwards. So if it's perfectly horizontal, it might be a little bit too far this way. You might want to just incline it a tiny bit. And then your hood should come up on about a 20 degree angle or so. Now, I'm aware that most people don't have digital inclinometers lying around at home to measure these angles, but your iPhone has got an angle gauge on it, which is accurate enough for what we're talking about here. But somewhere between, say, 10 and 20 degrees, the hood it shouldn't sit flat, which is the way that they've traditionally been designed, is that and this is how the bike that's behind me, which you might see in the footage here, it's got a very slight upwards inclination of the hood base. I would actually incline it a little bit further if your if your forearm is coming in from a fairly low angle. And the reason for this is, as soon as the hood gets too far down along the bar, the biggest problem that occurs is the rider will start to cock their wrist down to get to the flat of the hood, because the base of that hood is sitting in the flat section of the palm of their hand. So they will unconsciously deviate their wrist medially like this. And as soon as they do that, the motion that's coupled with that is this one. They will basically resist the urge to bend their elbows. They'll start locking their elbow and pulling their shoulder up at the same time to avoid inflammation of the tendons of the thumb and the radial deviators of the forearm. So as soon as the hoods get slightly too flat, it doesn't cause chaos, but the rider will go like this, and then they'll go like this, and they will just be less comfortable. They can get a bit of neck discomfort, they can get irritation in their traps. But basically, as soon as they're too far down, the rider will go like this. So if the hood is very, very flat relative to horizontal there, you might get a bit of a situation where if your elbows are coming in fairly low and you have that too flat, you'll go like this. So it's well worth rolling the hood back a little bit so that there's a bit of an incline of the section of the hood where the palm of your hand is sitting, a bit of an incline up. And that angle varies between people. It depends on what angle your forearm is coming in at. So if you're a very upright rider and your arm is coming really down, that angle will be fine. If you're a rider who rides fairly long and low and your forearms are often close to horizontal to the ground and you're tucking down, you're riding fast in bunches, you're trying to get into that aero position and you're capable of it, you might want to roll your hood back towards you more than you would think so that your elbows and your wrists are not being forced into that medial deviation that we're talking about. And you might find the hoods are so large that the whole palm of your hand here will sit more neatly into the hood if it's rolled back towards you. So a lot of the time, the gripe that I have with bikes that are built these days, a lot of the time the mechanics build them, and it seems to be almost universal, is that this section here is fairly flat and then the hood is placed a fair way down along the bar so that the section of the hood that's having your hand weight borne upon it is flat. And they get built like this a lot, and one of the first things I have to do with a lot of people that come in is go, okay, well your forearm is coming in on a sort of a 20-degree angle, fairly low. We need to just roll the hood back up towards you. And often we'll end up, if the bar is adjustable, we'll actually end up rolling the bar down a bit, but then moving the hood back along. And the rider goes, oh wow, gee, I feel much more relaxed in my arms as soon as I've done that. It promotes that elbow drop and the relaxation that we want to see in people. And assuming that you've got the rest of the position good, the comfort that comes from this can be quite marked. I did this with a rider just yesterday, actually, in a fitting session in the afternoon, and we only moved the hood sort of 10 mil along the bar. And he goes, my God, that feels completely different. And his whole shoulder posture went from this to like this. He looked a million times better. So it is one of those things where the traditional method of just placing them flat, which came from those old school hood, those old school hood designs, which were really, really short, just placing it all flat often doesn't work out the best. Well worth experimenting, bringing that flat section of the hood back up on a sort of a 10, 15, 20 degree angle and just seeing how it feels. It'll have the side effect also of shortening the reach. So if you're to the hoods, so if you think you're a little bit too stretched out, you can buy yourself a little bit of extra shortening of the reach to the hood by doing this. Yeah, which can sometimes be a bad thing if the reach is too short.
Of course.
Yeah. But that's my take on hood positioning. And it's one of those things which won't have massive implications on the amount of weight on your hands or anything, but it will help, surprisingly, with neck discomfort a lot of the time by altering that posture to be more relaxed. That's hoods, mate. And look, I should also mention this is worse with the hydraulic hoods because they're so big. If they're cocked down, the rider will just follow it with their hand. Yeah, they need to be more precise the larger the hood is, because your whole hand is on the hood when they're hydraulic ones, unless you've got the world's biggest hands, which I do not.
Long live the rim, eh?
Mate, I'm still stuck in the dark ages with a rim brake bike, and yeah,
nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. No, I haven't. It hasn't caused me a problem yet. But I'm assuming that the next bike purchase is going to be hydraulic because that's all you can get these days.
Coercion
by force, mate.
Thanks, mate.